Hey guys, welcome back to the Curly Reader. My name's Amanda, and today I want to share with you kind of my results of my 2020 goals and my 2020 TBR. All right, so we can all agree that 2020 was crap. For lack of a better term. It kind of threw everybody for a loop. However, at the beginning of 2020, I posted a 2020 goals video and 20 books that I would like to read in 2020. These were not just books off my shelves. These were just random, not random, I picked them with purpose. But they were a mixture of books that I had on my shelves and books that had just been on my Goodreads TBR for a really long time, books that I wanted to prioritize. And so I wanted to kind of go over with you what I was able to get to, what I wasn't able to get to, all of that. So let's just get into this. All right, so this is the spread for my 2020 goals and my 2020 TBR in my bullet journal, and this is what it looks like. As you can see, I did pretty good on my goals. So the first goal that I made for myself was to reread Harry Potter, and I did that. I reread all 7 books. I listened to the audiobooks for the first time, and I loved it. It was a great reread. I'm so glad I did it, and yeah, so that goal was accomplished. My second goal was to read the entire Anne of Green Gables series, all 8 books, and I did that. Actually, Tia from Tia and All the Books and I both hosted the Anne-along this past year, and it was so much fun. We read the entire Anne of Green Gables series. We started in January, we ended at the end of August, and it was a great time. It was great getting able to finally get through that entire series and be able to chat with a bunch of different people about it, and so accomplished that goal. All right, my next goal was to read 5 classics. So I consider classics, I don't even know. And this is kind of was my issue with this goal, is that I would read something and I'm like, is that considered a classic? So I put down that I accomplished this goal, but I don't know if I actually did. So the 2 books that I read that I know 110% are classics are The Christmas Carol by Charles Dickens and Pride and Prejudice by Jane Austen. I read those 2 books. Those are 110% considered classics. Outside of that, I also counted To Kill a Mockingbird because I feel like that's a modern classic, and that was a book that I read this year. And then I also counted And Then There Were None, which is a classic mystery, but I don't know if that's really considered a classic or not, but I counted it because in my perspective, that is a book that I feel I would not have probably picked up outside of some specific challenges. And for me, it was a classic. I'm trying to remember what the last one, I know I counted 5, but I cannot, for the life of me, remember what the last book was. Oh, I did read Betsy Tacy again. That was a reread for me as well, by Maud Hart Lovelace. That is a classic, so I did read that. I did not count the Anne of Green Gables books for this challenge. This had to be outside of the Anne of Green Gables series. I'm pretty sure Betsy Tacy was the 5th book that I counted as a classic. I'm like trying to really quick look through my list of all the different books that I read to see if there was another one that I missed somewhere that would be considered a classic. I did read Charlotte's Web, which I think is considered a children's classic as well. Let's see. I think that's it. I think those are the books that I read that I considered classics. And I think that some of those are probably debatable when you talk about what is a classic. I don't really know. So anyway, but I counted it as good because I read more classics than I ever have, and whatever. All right, the next challenge or goal that I gave myself was to read 10 nonfiction, and I blew that out of the park. I read like 20 nonfiction this past year, and so that was no problem at all. My next goal was to read 100 books, and I read 177, so that was done. All right, the next 2 goals were kind of more subjective. There wasn't a specific number tied to them. The first of which is to read off my shelves. I actually ended up reading, I have all my stats here. I ended up reading 84 books that I own and 92 books from the library. So, and I'm pretty sure that equals 176, not 177. So, who knows? That's okay. Not important. But that's kind of how things fell. And so I consider that great for reading off my shelves. It's almost half of my reading was books that I own. And so good for me. All right, and then my last goal is the one that's only halfway colored in, and that is to read cover buys. I read like 25 cover buys, and for me, that just means it's not necessarily a book I bought. It's just a book that I picked up purely based off the cover that I had never heard of before. It wasn't an author that I had heard of. It wasn't somebody else recommending it to me. It was just, I was in the library, or I was at the thrift store, or I was at the bookstore, and I picked this book up because it looked interesting, and I read it. So that I considered not, I would still like to do better, but that's okay. All right, now moving on. So those were my goals. So, I mean, 5 out of 6 ain't bad, guys. 5 out of 6 ain't bad. All right, for my 20 books that I would like to read in 2020, I completed 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. I read 10 of the 20 books. Not great. Could have been worse. I mean, given the year that we had, guys, could have been worse. I also permanently DNF'd or removed from my TBR 3 books. So that I'm happy with. So I only have 7 books left on this list that I would still like to read at some point in time, that I just didn't get to this past year. So this 10 books that I read off of this list were And Then There Were None, Pride and Prejudice, To Kill a Mockingbird, The Girl Who Drank the Moon, A Gentleman in Moscow, Where the Crawdads Sing, The Martian, Children of Blood and Bone, The Promised Neverland, and Artemis Fowl. So that was absolutely fabulous, and most of those I really enjoyed. There were a couple that were not my favorites, but that's okay. The 3 that I permanently have removed from my list, I DNF'd The Library Book, which is a nonfiction book about the LA library and a fire that they had there. And it was interesting, but it was not keeping my attention at all. And so I just DNF'd that, and I really don't care to go back to it. And then the other, another one that I ended up DNFing was The Forgotten Garden by Kate Morton. I'm still interested in reading Kate Morton, but this one was just really hard for me at the time. It's a really thick book. It's dual timeline, and the bouncing around between timelines was kind of throwing me off a little bit. And I think this one specifically was just not for me. I have another Kate Morton book that I'm interested in picking up though. So I may try her again in the future, but that one just didn't jive with me well, so I DNF'd that. And then the other one I just decided to remove from my TBR because I'm not interested in reading it anymore, and that is The Wrath and the Dawn by Renee. Audier, I believe, is who wrote that. So those are the 3 that are off of my TBR, and then the other 7 that I did not read, but that I still want to read at some point. A Darker Shade of Magic by V.E. Schwab, This Present Darkness by Frank Peretti, The Night Circus by Erin Morgenstern, The Lies of Locke Lamora by Scott Lynch, Outlander by Diana Gabaldon, The Secret Life of Bees by Sue Monk Kidd. Sorry, I had to think for a minute there. And My Grandmother Told Me to Tell You She's Sorry by Frederick Bachman. So those are the 7 books that I still want to get to. I just didn't get to this past year, and that's okay. I learned my lesson, and this next year, my TBR only has 10 books on it. So I'm hoping that we do better. So those are kind of the results of my goals, my TBR that I made in 2020. If you're interested in stats, I have my annual stats page here as well. As you can see, I gave up on tracking genre. It wasn't happening, guys. I have such a hard time figuring out genre. Reference my classics conversation from a couple minutes ago. I don't even know how to put things in genre, especially if they're cross genre. it was getting too stressful, and I'm like, this is not worth it. I don't care that much about the genre. My hair is like driving me absolutely nutty. Let's just, whatever. I don't care that much about genre. So I'm like, I quit. And after a couple months, I just stopped tracking it completely. But for format, I'm pretty sure that all these books are going to add up to not the right number. So it is what it is. Like I said, total I read 177 books, but all of these add up to 176. So I missed a book somewhere. I have no idea where. I'm not that worried about it. But generally speaking, for format, I read 6 ebooks. Moving forward, I'm counting ebooks as physical books because I read them with my eyes and not my ears, and I just don't read ebooks often enough to make it worth tracking. I read 84 physical books and 87 audiobooks, which is not surprising. We already went over my source, 92 from the library, 84 owned. The age range. This was a little eye-opening for me when I did my stats. 112 were middle grade. I'm going to see if I can get that number down a little bit this year. The goal is to read more adult, like proportionately, I would like to read more of my percentage be adult than middle grade. But yeah, this year was just a comfort reading year. I read for comfort. I did not read for to learn a whole lot. And middle grade brings me tons of comfort, so that's just what happened. I read 15 young adult books. Young adult has never been my huge like age range, and so I'm cool with that. And 49 adult books. I DNF'd 8 books, which I will go over in a different video. And then ratings wise, I had 55-star ratings, you guys. I was not expecting that. I had to recount that number multiple times because I always say I'm super stingy with my 5-star ratings. Apparently not this year. Like, holy crap. I had more 5-star ratings than 3-star ratings. That's rare for me. 72 4-star ratings, which I suspected. I give 4 stars a lot. 40 3-star ratings and 14 2-star ratings. I don't give 1-star ratings. 1-star ratings are my DNFs. So there's that. If I read enough of a book to have a strong feeling about it, I will read it and DNF it. But if I just am like bored with it within the first couple chapters and then there's nothing inherently wrong with it, it's just not for me, then I don't rate it. I just DNF it. So that's kind of that. So that's it. That's my stats and kind of my wrap up of the year as far as my goals from last year, my TBR from last year, kind of what I read. I hope that you enjoyed this. You can check out my 2021 goals and 2021 TBR if you are interested in kind of seeing how I plan on changing out my goals for this year. And yeah, other than that, I hope that you enjoyed this and I hope that you stick around and subscribe. And until next time. My kids are happy. See ya!